The alert came through at 11:47 on a Tuesday morning, and it almost stopped Ethan Colt's heart. Not because of the quarterly earnings report open on his desk, not because of the merger that had consumed 14 months of his life. It was a single notification from the estate's security system, motion detected near the East Garden Gate, that made him swipe his tablet to the live feed without thinking. What he saw made him go completely still. A man he didn't recognize was crouched at the iron gate at the far edge of his property, wire cutters in hand, watching the backyard with a focus that raised every hair on the back of Ethan's neck. His 6-year-old twins, Lily and Lucas, were 20 feet away from that gate, playing, laughing, completely unaware. And the new nanny, the one he'd barely spoken 10 words to since she'd arrived 4 days ago, was already moving. Maya Reyes hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't panicked. She'd simply looked up from where she'd been crouched beside Lucas, helping him build a tower from stacking rings, and in one smooth motion, she stood, took both children by the hand, and started walking them toward the house, casually, as if she'd just remembered something inside. She was talking to them the whole time, smiling, keeping their faces turned away from the gate. The man outside stood up when he realized he'd been spotted. He stared at her through the bars. Maya stared back for just 1 second, just long enough to make clear she'd seen him, that she'd memorized him. And then she stepped through the back door and was gone. 30 seconds later, Ethan got a text from an unknown number. "Tell your new help to mind her own business." He was already calling Marcus Webb, his head of security, before he'd finished reading it. Ethan Colt was not a man who showed fear. He'd built Colt Dynamics from a single angel investment and 2 failed prototypes into a $4 billion technology and real estate conglomerate before his 35th birthday. He'd faced down hostile takeover attempts, congressional investigations, and a media smear campaign orchestrated by a former business partner. He did not flinch, but he'd been flinching quietly for the past 18 months, ever since his wife, Claire, had died in a car accident on a rain-slicked road in the Berkshires. Ever since he'd sat in a hospital waiting room with 2 5-year-olds who kept asking when Mommy was coming home, and he hadn't had an answer. The estate in Greenwich, Connecticut had been Claire's idea. She'd wanted space, trees, a yard where the twins could run. Now it felt like a fortress he was maintaining for other people. He worked from his home office more often than not because he wanted to be present, but because he couldn't make himself leave completely. Some part of him still worried that if he turned his back, something else would be taken. He'd gone through 3 nannies in 18 months. The first had quit after 2 weeks, citing Ethan's communication style, which was his assistant's diplomatic way of saying he'd been cold and unreachable. The second had lasted 4 months before he'd discovered she was feeding information about his family schedule to his sister-in-law, Diana Hargrove. The third had simply not shown up one morning and stopped returning calls. Diana had recommended this one. That alone was reason enough for suspicion. "Her name is Maya Reyes," his HR director had told him. "Certified in early childhood development. Former case manager with the Connecticut Department of Children and Families. 3 years of private nanny experience. Her references are exceptional. Spotless record." Diana recommended her, Ethan had said flatly. Ms. Hargrove did mention her name, yes, but her credentials are entirely independent. Screen her yourself. Don't involve Diana. He'd expected a pushover, someone polished and eager to please. What arrived at his door on a Monday morning was a woman in her early 30s with dark eyes that took in everything at once, a calm that felt earned rather than performed, and a handshake firm enough that Lily had looked at her in impressed surprise and said, "You shake hands like Daddy." Maya had smiled at that. "Good to know I'm in good company." He hadn't smiled back. He'd gone upstairs to his office, pulled up the security feeds, and watched her. For 4 days, that was how Ethan Colt got to know Maya Reyes. Through a grid of 16 camera angles covering every accessible space in the house and grounds. He watched her read to Lucas at bedtime, doing all the voices, even the ridiculous dragon one that made the boy dissolve into giggles. He watched her teach Lily to braid hair using a doll first, so Lily understood the motion before they tried it on her own head. He watched her eat lunch alone at the kitchen island with a paperback propped open, perfectly content in her own company. He watched her carry both twins on her back at the same time up the back stairs, laughing breathlessly because they'd dared her to. She never looked at the cameras, not once. But every few days, she moved through a room in a way that suggested she'd clocked exactly where each one was, the way she always positioned herself with a clear line of sight to both children, regardless of where in the room she was standing. It wasn't paranoia. It was training. That was what unsettled him, in the best possible way. He'd called his contact at the Department of Children and Families on day 2 and asked, obliquely, about Maya Reyes's time there. He got a lot of careful language about personnel privacy. Then a long pause. Then, "She was good at her job, Mr. Colt. Let's leave it there." He was still thinking about that when the security alert fired on Tuesday morning, and everything changed. By the time Ethan made it downstairs, he'd taken the stairs 3 at a time, something he hadn't done since college. Maya had the twins settled at the kitchen table with apple slices and peanut butter, cartoons playing on the small counter TV. Lucas was already absorbed. Lily was watching Maya with curious eyes. "Mr. Colt." Maya turned when she heard him. Her voice was level. "I was about to call you. The man at the east gate, I've already sent you the screenshots." She slid her phone across the counter. "I photographed him through the kitchen window before I brought the kids in. 3 images, different angles. He was there at least 8 minutes before I moved them." Ethan looked at the photos. Clear, detailed. "You kept them calm." They didn't need to be scared. The threat wasn't inside the house. "How did you know he was a threat? He could have been a delivery driver, a landscaper." "A delivery driver doesn't stand at a locked gate with wire cutters for 8 minutes while watching children play," she said, without any heat in it, just fact. He wasn't in a uniform or carrying packages. He was assessing. Ethan studied her for a long moment. She held his gaze without difficulty. "You've seen this before." Something moved through her expression, too fast to name. "Yes," she said. "I have." He looked back down at the phone, at the face of the man at the gate. "I'm going to need you to stay close to them today, more than usual." "Of course," she paused. "Mr. Colt, is there someone who might want access to your children that you haven't authorized?" The question landed like a stone dropped into still water. He thought of Diana, of the custody evaluation she'd quietly initiated through a family law attorney 3 months ago, claiming she was concerned about the children's emotional environment. He'd shut it down with his own lawyers, hard and fast, but he hadn't told anyone on his household staff. "I'm looking into it," he said. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Diana Hargrove arrived unannounced that Friday afternoon, which was precisely the kind of thing she did. She swept through the front door in a camel coat and 4-inch heels, Her blonde hair swept back in the kind of effortless chignon that required 45 minutes of effort, and greeted the twins with the calibrated warmth of a woman who wanted to be liked but wasn't willing to get down on the floor. "I thought I'd check in on my darlings," she said, in that voice that always made Ethan feel like he was being managed. Diana was Claire's older sister. She'd been useful after Claire died, arranging funeral details, handling notifications to family, appearing exactly when she was needed. Ethan had been grateful at first. It had taken him almost 6 months to realize that every time Diana showed up, she left with something: information, access, influence over household decisions he hadn't quite noticed he'd surrendered. He'd discovered the spy arrangement entirely by accident. The second nanny had been receiving a monthly wire transfer from a shell company, Ethan's forensic accountant, traced back to Diana's personal holdings. When he'd confronted her, Diana had cried, told him she was worried about the children, told him she only wanted what was best for them. He'd believed her. The first time. Now she was standing in his kitchen, looking at Maya Reyes with the brightness of a woman who'd underestimated someone and was recalibrating in real time. "You must be the new girl," Diana said. "Maya Reyes." Maya offered her hand with the same firm grip she'd given Ethan on day one. "Nice to meet you, Ms. Hargrove. Diana, please." The smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "How are you settling in?" "Very well, thank you." "The children seem happy." Diana looked toward Lily and Lucas, who were building something ambitious from magnetic tiles in the living room. "Though I do think a structured curriculum would benefit them more than," she gestured loosely, "free play." "Research supports the developmental value of child-directed play at this age," Maya said pleasantly, "especially for emotional regulation and problem-solving. But we do have structured reading time, math games, and Spanish practice built into the daily schedule if you'd like to review it." Diana blinked. "How thorough." "I try to be." From the hallway, just out of sight, Ethan watched. He'd been heading to the kitchen when he heard Diana's voice and stopped instinctively. He didn't examine the impulse too closely. He just watched Maya handle his sister-in-law with the same quiet precision she applied to everything else, and felt something unlock in his chest that had been sealed for a very long time. Marcus Webb identified the man at the gate by Wednesday of the following week. His name was Gary Pellew, a former process server turned freelance private investigator, affiliated through 2 layers of shell referrals with a family law firm in Hartford. The same firm Diana Hargrove had retained for her custody evaluation. Ethan sat with that information for a long time before he did anything with it. He turned it the way he'd learned to turn difficult data, examining every angle, making sure he understood what it meant before he moved. What it meant was that Diana wasn't just monitoring his household anymore. She was escalating. She'd had someone physically assess his property, likely to build a case that the estate was unsafe, that security was inadequate, that the children were at risk. It was the opening move of someone preparing to argue before a family court judge that the children's father was neglectful. What it also meant was that Maya had spotted Diana's operative before his own security system had flagged anything meaningful. She'd identified the threat, protected the children, documented the evidence, and reported it, all within a single morning. And she'd done it without alarming the twins or making a single dramatic production of it. He needed to know why she was really here. He asked her that evening, after the twins were in bed, finding her in the kitchen cleaning up from dinner. He didn't soften the question. "Why did you take this position, Ms. Reyes? You have a master's degree in social work. You spent 6 years in child protective services. You could be directing a program somewhere. Why are you a nanny?" She didn't stop washing the dish in her hand. She finished it, dried it, set it aside, and then turned to face him. "Because I was burned out," she said, "and because this particular position came at the right time. Diana recommended you. Diana put my name in front of your HR department. I got the job because of my credentials, not because of her." "Did you know who she was when she contacted you?" A pause, fractional, but he caught it. "I knew she was Claire Colt's sister. And? And nothing. She said a family friend needed a nanny with experience in high-need situations. I fit the profile." "That's not the whole answer." Maya looked at him for a long moment. The kitchen was quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator, and somewhere upstairs, the distant sound of Lucas talking in his sleep, a habit that had apparently started after Claire died and never quite stopped. "No," she said finally, "it isn't. But it's what I can give you right now." He should have pushed harder. He didn't. The answer came not from Maya, but from a folder that arrived on his desk the following Monday, forwarded by his attorney from a source his attorney refused to name, accompanied by a brief note that read, "You should know what your sister-in-law has been doing." Inside was a 12-page investigative summary, the kind of document assembled by someone who knew exactly how to build an evidentiary record. It began with Claire, the accident 18 months ago. Wet road, a curve on a rural highway, no guardrail. The police report said single vehicle accident, driver error. No skid marks on Claire's side of the road. Ethan had accepted that because he'd needed to accept something, because standing still in grief felt like drowning, and he'd had 2 5-year-olds who needed him to keep moving forward. The summary said the accident had been investigated, quietly, unofficially, by a former DCF case manager who'd come across something unusual while closing out an unrelated case. An insurance policy, a clause, a beneficiary amendment filed 14 months before the accident. Diana Hargrove had been added as secondary beneficiary to a life insurance policy on Claire Colt through a trust structure predating Ethan and Claire's marriage. Claire had never mentioned it. The amendment had been filed without Claire's knowledge, using a forged signature on a document notarized by a woman who had, 6 months after the accident, relocated to Portugal. And the case manager who'd found it, who'd tried to report it through official channels and been shut down twice, who'd eventually been quietly encouraged to resign from her position, was Maya Reyes. Ethan read the file 3 times. Then he called Marcus. "Get me everything she filed before she left DCF, every report, every correspondence." "Already have it," Marcus said. She sent it herself. The folder came from her, anonymously. He found her in the twins' room that afternoon, sitting on the floor between their beds, reading a chapter book aloud while both children lay on their stomachs, listening. He stood in the doorway, watching Lily's face, the way she tracked every word, the way Lucas had unconsciously reached out and laid his hand on Maya's knee at some point, without either of them noticing. He waited until she finished the chapter and the twins settled into afternoon quiet time before he said, quietly, "Can we talk?" She followed him to his study without comment. He closed the door. He set the folder on his desk between them. She looked at it, then at him. Her face held the composure of someone who'd been waiting for a specific moment and had prepared herself to meet it. "You investigated Claire's death," he said. "Yes." "And you were shut down." "Twice. The first time, my supervisor said it was outside DCF's jurisdiction. The second time, I was told my performance metrics were declining and offered a supportive transition. Her voice stayed even. I knew what that meant. So you came here. I needed to be close enough to get the evidence I couldn't get from a desk. She met his eyes. And I needed to make sure your children were safe. Because if Diana was willing to do what I believe she did to Claire, then Lily and Lucas don't. The word came out rougher than he intended. He pressed the heels of his hands against the edge of the desk. Breathed. Don't say it out loud yet. Not until we have everything. The notary who authenticated the amendment, Maya said. Her name is Sylvia Crane. I tracked her to Lisbon. She agreed to provide a sworn affidavit. She said Diana told her Claire had authorized the change verbally and was traveling. She'd sign the hard copy when she returned. Sylvia didn't question it. She believed her. She's been living with that for 18 months. Ethan's jaw tightened. Why didn't you go to the police with this? I did. Anonymously. 4 months ago. Her voice stayed level. Nothing happened. Diana Hargrove donates to 3 police PACs in Hartford County. She sits on a hospital board. She's untouchable through normal channels. The only person with enough leverage to move this forward is you. He looked at her for a long moment. You risked your career, your safety. You walked into my house under a false premise. Your children were at risk, she said simply. That was enough. He'd built his entire professional identity on the belief that information was power. That if he moved correctly, if he anticipated, if he stayed colder and calmer and more strategic than everyone else in the room, he could control outcomes. He'd believed that for 15 years. He hadn't been able to control the one thing that mattered most. But she had tried. This woman, who owed him nothing, who'd already surrendered her career over this, had walked into his house and placed herself between his children and whatever was coming next. He didn't have the right words for what that did to him. He wasn't sure he'd ever find them. Tell me what you need, he said. What followed was 10 days of controlled warfare, conducted entirely in corporate conference rooms, attorneys' offices, and encrypted phone calls. Ethan's legal team, led by a litigation partner who'd spent 2 decades dismantling fraudulent estate structures, subpoenaed the trust documents. They deposed Sylvia Crane via video from Lisbon. They obtained the original insurance amendment and submitted it to a forensic document examiner who confirmed with 97% certainty that the signature was not Claire Colt's. Meanwhile, Gary Pellew, Diana's operative at the gate, was arrested on charges of trespassing and unlicensed surveillance. His client agreement, which his attorney ill-advisedly included in a discovery filing, showed clearly who had hired him and why. Diana called Ethan 4 times during the first week. He didn't answer. On the 5th call, she left a voicemail that lasted 7 minutes, cycling through justification, accusation, grief, and something that almost sounded like guilt before collapsing back into defensiveness. He saved it. His attorneys were very pleased. On a Thursday evening, while Lily and Lucas were at a neighbor's birthday party under Marcus's watchful eye, Diana Hargrove arrived at the Greenwich estate for the last time. She hadn't called ahead. She never did. But this time, Ethan was waiting in the front parlor with his lead attorney and a detective from the Connecticut State Police Financial Crimes Unit. Diana stepped through the door in her camel coat and stopped when she saw them. The color drained from her face in real time. Claire trusted you, Ethan said. He kept his voice quiet. He knew that was the worst part, not the volume, but the stillness. She thought of you as her protector. When she was little, you were the one she called when she was scared. Diana's mouth worked. Ethan, You want to explain to me what you did. You want to stand in the house she loved and give me a reason? I needed. It was never supposed. Her voice came apart at the seams. The money was supposed to come to the family. It was always our family's money. It should have. She was your sister. The words came out like something tearing. She was my wife. They are her children. The detective stepped forward. Diana Hargrove was charged with insurance fraud, forgery of financial documents, and, pending a review of the accident reconstruction evidence that Maya's original file had flagged, potential criminal involvement in Claire's death. She was released on bond and surrendered her passport. The custody petition was withdrawn that same afternoon. In the days that followed, the estate felt different. Lighter in a way Ethan couldn't fully articulate, like pressure that had been quietly building in the walls for 18 months had finally been released. He wasn't better. He knew better than to believe that this resolved the grief. Claire was still gone. The twins still woke from dreams sometimes and called for a mother who wasn't there. He still walked into the kitchen some mornings and felt the particular specific shape of her absence. The way her coffee cup had always been on the left side of the maker, the way she'd hummed without noticing she was doing it. But something had shifted. He'd stopped treading in quicksand. Maya gave him 2 weeks' notice on a Monday. He found the envelope on his desk in the morning, typed and formal and entirely like her, efficient, complete, containing a full transition plan for the twins, suggested routines to maintain, notes on each child's current emotional needs. It was, objectively, the most thorough resignation letter he'd ever received. He went downstairs with it in his hand. She was in the kitchen making lunches. Lucas was narrating a very complex story about a robot he intended to build when he was older, and Maya was listening with complete attention while simultaneously cutting a sandwich into the exact triangles he preferred. "He prefers triangles," Ethan said from the doorway. "I know," Maya said, without turning around. "You've been paying attention." "That's my job." "You're leaving," he said. Lucas looked up sharply. "What?" "No one's leaving right now, bud." Maya's voice was exactly right, steady, unbothered, redirecting without dismissing. "Can you go get your backpack? We're almost ready." Lucas accepted this and thundered out of the kitchen. Maya turned from the counter. "The case is in the hands of the authorities," she said. "The children are safe. You don't need me for the reason I came anymore. I need you for every other reason." It wasn't what he'd planned to say. It arrived without warning, the way true things sometimes did, bypassing whatever filter he'd spent 15 years constructing between himself and the rest of the world. Maya went very still. "Mr. Colt." "Ethan." "Ethan!" His name in her voice was something different from what he'd expected. Careful, warm, holding some weight she hadn't yet set down. "I came here under a pretense. Even if the intentions were good, you protected my children from a threat I didn't see coming. You documented evidence that may bring justice to their mother. You walked into an impossible situation with nothing but your own integrity, and you didn't leave, even when it would have been safer to." He set the letter on the counter between them. "I'm not asking you to stay because I need a nanny. I'm asking because—" He stopped. "Found it. Because Lily learned to braid her own hair last week, and the first thing she wanted to do was show me. And because Lucas hasn't talked in his sleep since you got here." Maya looked at the letter for a long moment. Something moved across her face. Soft and complicated and entirely real. "That's not a job description," she said quietly. "No," he agreed. "It isn't." She didn't stay immediately. That wasn't who she was, and he understood that. She went home to Hartford for a week. To see her mother, she said, who'd been managing a health scare that Maya had been quietly handling alongside everything else, because that was the thing about Maya Reyes. She carried weight without advertising it. He called her on the fourth day. He didn't have a specific reason. He just called. "How's your mother?" he asked. "Better. She's stubborn. It's a good quality." Lily wanted to tell you she mastered the French braid. A pause. Then a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and something more fragile. She did. On the doll first, then her own hair, then on Marcus, who was apparently a very willing volunteer. Marcus Webb let a 6-year-old braid his hair. She's very persuasive. He could hear her smiling. He'd learned to hear it, the particular quality of air around her words when she was genuinely pleased. "Tell her I'm proud of her. You could tell her yourself," he said, "when you come back." Another pause, longer this time. "I haven't said yes yet," she said. "I know." He wasn't going to push. He'd learned, in the last several weeks, that the most powerful thing he could offer Maya Reyes was room to make her own choices. She'd been maneuvered enough. "I just wanted you to know the door's open, on my end, all of it." She was quiet for a moment. Outside his window, the evening was settling over the grounds. That long blue light of a Connecticut June, the sound of Lucas and Lily playing in the yard below. Some complicated game involving a hose and rules that appeared to change every 30 seconds. He watched them without thinking about much. Just watched. "All of it," Maya said slowly, as if testing the weight of the words. "All of it." She came back on a Friday, not as the nanny. She hadn't signed a new contract. She arrived at the front door in the afternoon with a weekend bag and the particular expression of a woman who had decided something and intended to see it through. Lily opened the door before Ethan could reach it, because Lily had apparently staked out the front window since noon. "Maya!" She launched herself forward with the complete physical confidence of a child who has never doubted her welcome. And Maya caught her without even bracing, just opened her arms and absorbed the impact, and buried her face briefly in Lily's hair with her eyes closed. Lucas appeared behind his sister at a slightly more composed pace that fooled absolutely no one, and Maya reached out and pulled him in with her free arm and said, "Look at you two. Did you both grow while I was gone?" "I grew a centimeter," Lucas said seriously. "I measured. A whole centimeter. In 1 week?" "Maya." He was urgent about this. "I definitely grew." "I believe you," she said, and she was laughing, and Lily was already pulling her inside by the hand, beginning a rapid summary of every event of the past 7 days, and Maya let herself be pulled, listening, nodding, asking exactly the right questions in exactly the right places. Ethan stood back and watched all of this happen in his own doorway. He thought about the man at the gate and the folder on his desk and the security feeds he'd spent 4 days watching before he'd understood what he was actually seeing. He thought about what it meant to have someone in your life who moved toward danger instead of away from it, who noticed what mattered, who showed up, who stayed. He thought about Claire, who'd wanted this house because she'd wanted room for things to grow. He thought she'd have liked Maya. He stepped forward, and Maya looked up from where Lily was demonstrating the French braid technique on a stuffed rabbit. And there was something beginning in her eyes that he recognized because it was beginning in him too. Something that didn't demand to be named yet, that only asked to be allowed. "Glad you're here," he said. Quiet, meant. She held his gaze, and in it was everything she hadn't said yet. Everything that didn't need to be said yet. There would be time. That was the gift they'd both been given somewhere in the wreckage of the last 18 months, without realizing it until now. "Me too," she said. Months later, when Lily told her kindergarten teacher that she had two mommies, one in heaven and one who lived with them now and knew all the best chapter books and could braid anyone's hair, Ethan heard about it from the teacher, who reported it with such warmth that he had to step into the hallway and collect himself for a moment before he could respond. When he told Maya that evening, sitting on the back porch while the twins ran through the yard in the long summer light, she was quiet for a while, not sad, not overwhelmed, just present in the particular way she was always present, taking things in fully before she responded. "What did you tell the teacher?" she asked. "I told her Lily was right," he said. Maya looked at him. The summer light was doing something to the evening, gold and slow and endless, and the twins were calling to each other in that private language of siblings that no one else is ever meant to fully understand, and everything was imperfect and incomplete, and still somehow more than Ethan Colt had believed 18 months ago that he would ever get to have again. He reached over and took her hand. She let him. That was how it truly began. Not with a single dramatic moment, but with the accumulation of 100 small choices. A woman who'd walked toward danger when anyone else would have walked away. A man who'd finally learned to look at what was actually in front of him instead of what he'd already decided to see. And two children who had never once stopped believing that the world was a place worth trusting, even when it had given them every reason not to. The iron gate at the East Garden had a new lock on it. The security system had been upgraded. The house still held its grief in certain rooms and certain hours, the way houses do, the way love does, not erased, but absorbed, becoming part of the structure rather than a wound in it. And somewhere in the rooms above, in the quiet of a summer night, Lucas's dreams had finally gone still.